Things are heating up not only in the country, but they're heating up right here in the state of Texas. And the country, of course, is Donald Trump, a man who wants to draw us back toward the Constitution, wants to limit the size and scope of the federal government, versus Kamala Harris, who is a Marxist, who supported Marxist causes, who supports gigantic government, world government, United Nations. The distinctions are very, very clear. But also right here in the state of Texas, Colin Allred, on the Democratic ticket, is challenging Republican incumbent Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is a constitutional conservative. He's a man who values life. He's a man who values limited government. He's a man who honors God and freedom. Colin Allred, on the other hand, has never seen a big government program that he does not like, that he does not want to fund. He has supported every big government program, including the United Nations, foreign wars, the government involved in education, the government involved in transgender surgeries. He supported all of these, and so Texans need to be aware. So let's begin. First of all, we'll talk about the Cruz-Allred race first, and then I want to speak a little bit about some things regarding the Harris-Trump race. Number one, regarding Colin Allred's voting record. It's just interesting to note, if you go back, I have a voting record right here in front of me. Thinking about big government, I said he's for big government. He's not met a program that he does not want, that's federal, international, and he wants to siphon the money from the American taxpayer to pay for big government. So, for example, how about the forced vaccinations? The forced vaccinations, a couple of years ago, he voted in favor of the forced vaccinations. Not only that, but he voted in favor of the ESG fiduciary rule. What's the ESG fiduciary rule? Well, the December 22 Labor Department rule modified standards under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act to allow retirement plan fiduciaries to consider environmental, social, and governance factors in making investment decisions and exercising shareholder rights, including when voting on shareholder resolutions and board nominations. These are woke ESG policies, and the House took up to reverse those policies that forbids these governments, these corporations, or government labor department from considering ESG woke Marxist policies when considering monies that are distributed. But Colin Allred is absolutely in favor of the ESG fiduciary rule. That shows you right there that Colin Allred is not for the state of Texas. How about the federal water rule? I remember several years ago, I actually campaigned to get into a county commissioner's position in Wichita County. And the big issue at that time was the Waters of the United States rule, that is a WOTUS rule, in which the federal government has been battling states like Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, other states along different rivers. We had the Red River here, and they've battled us because they want to control the rivers, even though the federal rule is that they have to be navigable waters. But nevertheless, the federal government wants to control not only navigable waters, but they want to expand the definition to include all waters of the United States, even water that is under the ground. That would, in effect, give every square inch of soil to the United States government by the so-called water rules, the Waters of the United States rule. Well, regarding that, the federal water rule, Colin Allred has voted in favor of it. That is, just think about this. Think about the mission creep that has occurred by the Democrats' hand, Colin Allred being one of them. Think about the mission creep. That is, the federal government said, we'll control the waters that are navigable, that is, because we want to control the communication, we want to control the trade on the rivers like the Mississippi River, the Missouri River, and so forth. But now they want to expand it to cover all waters, even the waters that are underground, underneath our properties. That's what's going on here, and they have continued to push on that direction, but with backing the EPA, which is a big government socialistic program, and Colin Allred has been all in favor of doing exactly that. So that's something else about the Colin Allred that people don't realize that he's in favor of. How about when terminating the Department of Education was considered in 2023. By the way, the Department of Education, just like the EPA, is unconstitutional. And so it was considered, consequently, to terminate the Department of Education. Do you know where Colin Allred stands on that? He voted in favor of keeping the Department of Education. The problems that we have in education are traceable to, number one, family life, the breakdown of the family. Number two, the takeover by the federal government of education. Colin Allred has been all in favor of doing that. Consider also a couple of other items that he has been in favor of and also voted against. How about this one? This is abortion services. This was just this year. Abortion services that is paid for by the Department of Defense. And that is, the vote came up in the House to prohibit the Department of Defense from paying or reimbursing expenses for abortion services. It would also repeal in October 2022 Defense Department memo entitled Ensuring Access to Reproductive Health Care. Under the policy established by this memo, the Defense Department reimburses travel expenses for service members who travel to get an abortion in another state where abortion is legal. You know where Colin Allred stood on this. It's interesting that the debate that Cruz and Allred had the other night, that some of the commentators thought, well, Cruz is weak on abortion or weak on the stance regarding abortion. Look here, this is Colin Allred wants the federal government to pay for not only abortion all the way up to the time of birth, but also pay for travel expenses from the federal government taking money out of my pocketbook. That absolutely is not only unconstitutional, it's immoral. That's what Colin Allred stands for. How about Ukraine? I just wonder how many people are really in favor of the United States being in Ukraine. This is a huge, huge boondoggle, and we have continued to pour billions of dollars into it. Colin Allred doing exactly the same. Ted Cruz opposing all of these measures, but Colin Allred wants to support the continuing giving money and support and ammunition and protection to people in Ukraine. How about DEI funding? This is during consideration of a bill to reauthorize the Federal Aviation Administration's representative, Mary Miller, offered an amendment to prevent funds in the bill from being used to hire diversity, equity, and inclusion and DEI or DEI officials or to conduct DEI training. So they were considering money for the FAA, but Mary Miller, Republican from Illinois, said we cannot have the money spent for DEI programs. Well, you know who is against that, and that would be, of course, Colin Allred. He wanted DEI to be funded by taxpayer money. DEI is nothing but diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that means treat individuals differently. That's what equity means, treat individuals differently because of different racial backgrounds. That's what he wants the government to do. That is not a constitutional stance. That is not a constitutionally sound position at all. How about this one? Migration and refugee assistance. This is $2 billion considered of funding for the State Department's Migration and Refugee Assistance Program. This program, giving over $2 billion to the refugee resettlement program, encourages people to come here. Here's something that I would like for us to consider. I want someone to put their finger on one line of the Constitution or federal law that authorizes a person who works for me and you, that authorizes them to take money out of my pocket and give it to someone else, and especially give it to someone who does not even belong in this country. That is an incentive for people to come into this country, and they are doing so, flooding by the millions and millions under the Biden administration. Colin Allred is all in favor of this. This is absolutely suicide for America. There are other things, too, that we could point out, but those are some of the areas that we needed to notice. Now, let's turn attention. And by the way, I simply say that please vote for Ted Cruz. Vote for Ted Cruz. And voting begins next Monday, so that's early voting. Go out and vote early for Ted Cruz. Now, here's something else. Kamala Harris. Now, Colin Allred, he mirrors Kamala Harris. He mirrors her not only in his policy positions, but he mirrors her in the way that he feints and dodges and tries to go back on some of his positions that he's taken and try to erase his record. So this is an article by R. Court Kirkwood in the New American in September of this year. And this is entitled, Harris's Far-Left Answers to a 2019 ACLU Candidate Questionnaire Resurface. Now, this is something, of course, that blows the cover off of Harris's supposed I was born in a middle-class family stance. So here's the article. A look back at Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris's answers to the 2019 Candidate Questionnaire from the ACLU shows that she might be the most far-left candidate of her party ever nominated for president. She favored the pro-communist group's crackpot positions on, and that would be the ACLU's, crackpot positions on immigration, transgender rights, criminal justice reform, and more. Harris appears to have reversed herself on some positions, apparently to show that she has left the fever swamps of the radical left. But her answers to the inquiry squarely placed her in the farthest fringe of the American left. Indeed, during the presidential debate, former President GOP nominee Donald Trump might remind her of a few things. So writes Kirkwood. Number one, regarding open borders and immigration. Harris's most radical positions were those on immigration, detained illegal aliens, and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. When asked whether she would, quote, provide fair and achievable paths to citizenship for the then 11 million illegal aliens, and by the way, that has changed now because it's about 20 million, the candidate said, yes, she would provide fair and achievable paths to citizenship for illegal aliens. Indeed, she says, prioritize it. We see that happening right now in America. They are prioritizing bringing in illegal aliens, paying them to come to this country. She also promised to keep those illegals under President Barack Hussein Obama's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, in the country for good. She said all DACA recipients would get work permits. And plus she said this, quote, I will also make sure that parents of U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents, as well as all other law-abiding immigrants with ties to our communities, are able to apply for deferred action to protect them from the prospect of deportation. You know, America is the only country of which I'm aware in which we have lawyers and people who are defense lawyers, defense attorneys on the border, ready for a person to step across the border and then take up their case and sue the United States government so that they might stay here. And this is exactly what she wants. This is exactly what she stated. This is precisely how she answered the question from the ACLU. She would make sure, she said, that parents of U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents, as well as other law-abiding immigrants with ties to our communities, are able to apply for deferred action to protect them from the prospect of deportation. This is lawlessness. The law states that if they come in illegally, they are to be taken out and escorted out of the country and come in only legally. This, therefore, is what she is saying is absolutely, fundamentally, not only anti-constitutional, immoral, but it is illegal. And it amazes me that we have candidates running for office who are floating illegal ideas, and then the Democrats are voting for them. What in the world have we come to? By the way, how can they be law-abiding immigrants, having come in here illegally, and yet they call them law-abiding immigrants? That shows you the Democrat double-speak, law-abiding. No, they're breaking the law to come here. I'm going to say this again. I've said this many times before. I have been, all of my adult life, been decrying writing congressmen involved in trying to get the Congress of the United States to actually enforce the rules or enforce the law at the border. But instead of enforcing the law, we've had just a flow, especially under the Biden administration, a flow of illegal immigrants. And even before that, Trump got it down to about, 2 million that came in well, that's 2 million too many. We don't need to be offering taxpayer money to people who are illegal, hitting here illegally. It's just absolutely atrocious, and all of it's going to do is destroy the culture of our nation. But going on with the ACLU questionnaire, they asked her also whether Harris would commit to ending the use of ICE detainers. ICE issues detainers to state and local authorities to hold illegals arrested for a crime until ICE can take them into custody for deportation. State and local authorities often ignore them, but nevertheless, she said, yes, no more detainers. As California Attorney General, she said she told the state and local authorities not to honor detainers. It just blows my mind how wildly liberal the Democrats have become. They don't want any border. It's not about the fact that they are failing in the border policies. They are hugely successful. The Biden administration has been hugely successful at the border because their goal is to erase the border. In that, they are successful. But here's what Harris had to say. As president, I will focus enforcement on increasing public safety, not tearing apart immigrant families. Now notice how she defines public safety, not tearing apart immigrant families. So it doesn't matter if someone comes in here illegally. The safety she has in mind is the safety of people who have broken our laws. That's the safety she has in mind. She goes on to say, this includes requiring ICE to obtain a warrant where probable cause exists and to end the use of detainers. Absolutely astounding comment. So not only are the illegals prioritized with the Biden-Harris ticket, but now she tells us we're going to practice safety for the American people, and she has in mind safety for illegal immigrants here. And she says that ICE must obtain a warrant. How about the fact that they broke the law to come here? How is it that they now come underneath the Bill of Rights that we have in this country? Just stunning regarding her answers. As for detaining illegals who jumped the border, Harris vowed to end detention. Our immigrant detention system, she says, is out of control. I believe we must end the unfair incarceration of thousands of individuals, families, and children. She brags, I was one of the first senators after President Trump was elected to advocate for a decrease in the funding of ICE. I have led efforts to urge the Senate Appropriations Committee to decrease detention dollars. As president, I will fight to pass my DONE, that is Detention Oversight Not Expansion Act, into law, which would increase the oversight of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement detention facilities, slash detention by at least 50%, and halt funding for the construction or expansion of new facilities. End of quote. It's a long quote. What she is interested in and what the Democrat Party is interested in is hamstringing lawful, abiding Americans and the law, people who are the enforcers of our law, such as ICE. She wants to hamstring them. That's what she's after, not about securing the border. The choice is absolutely clear between her and Trump. How about transition surgeries for inmates and detainees? That would be at taxpayer expense. So even more radical is her position on so-called transgender prison inmates and detained illegals. The ACLU asked whether she would use executive authority to provide taxpayer-funded transition surgery for trans prison inmates and illegals in detention. All right, taxpayer-funded transition surgery. And here's her answer. Yes, as California Attorney General, she says she pushed the state Department of Corrections to provide surgery for inmates. Quote, I support policies ensuring that federal prisoners and detainees are able to obtain medically necessary care for gender transition, including surgical care, while incarcerated or detained. Now, that just absolutely another blows your mind answer, isn't it? Because she demands that taxpayers fund transition surgery. I don't think that's what American people want, this kind of person. And by the way, Colin Allred lines up with her in all of these things. Colin Allred is going to support, if she gets in and if he gets in, this is what Texas is going to look like. She answered also, transition treatment is a medical necessity, and I will direct all federal agencies responsible for providing essential medical care to deliver transition treatment. Ridiculous. Absurd. It's like school children could see through this one. Transition surgery, transgender surgery, essential? Boy, I tell you, I don't know what the Democrat Party has lost completely their mind. How about releasing criminals? This is very frightening. The ACLU asked whether Harris would immediately grant clemency to the 25,000 federal prisoners and push the state to release another 250,000 prisoners. Total criminals to be released would be 275,000. Now, Harris did not commit to a number, but she did say she would use my clemency and pardon power on a broader basis than has been done in the past to overturn the convictions of people incarcerated for nonviolent drug offenses. Now, you know, that would be a very small fraction of people in prison. One report on CNN was stated this way. On 2019 ACLU questionnaire, Kamala Harris said she would supported taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained immigrants. So there you have it on CEN, even reported that way also. Now, these are the kind of answers that we might expect the Karl Marxes of the world and the Chuck Schumers of the world and the George Soroses of the world to give. But these are also the answers that Kamala Harris gives, and Colin Allred is right there with her. We need to stop both Harris and Allred in this next election. Please get out and vote. Donald Trump, Ted Cruz.